Order the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education. It's April 18th, 2017. May we have a roll call, please?
Student Board Member Greensfelder. Present. Student Board Member Yoon.
Present.
Board Member Blanchard.
Charlie, say you're here.
I am here.
Board Member Trutain.
Here.
Board Member Clark.
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray.
Here.
President Black.
Here. For those who wish to participate, we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance.
Ready to begin. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can we have a reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement?
The mission of Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. The board took one action in closed session. The board voted unanimously to reassign a certificated administrator mid-year. Next, the approval of the agenda. Before we approve the agenda, I'm going to suggest one slight change. There are two items under review and action, and I'm going to suggest we reverse the order because the item number 2, approved declaration of need for fully qualified educators, will only take a couple of minutes. But if we do that one first, then the other review and action item, consideration of appointment of an impartial administrative panel for student expulsions, can be the last thing on the agenda, and we can run as late as we need to with that item. So with that suggested change, does anyone else have any other changes to the agenda? Okay, can we have a motion?
I move we adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Thanks, Charlie. Good. We have the first thing on the agenda tonight is a resolution for Teacher Appreciation Week.
Thank you, President Black and trustees and student board members. I'm going to turn this item over to Cynthia Tia, who is our Director of Human Resources, to talk to us about Teacher Appreciation Week. Ms. Tia?
Thank you. Annually, we recognize Teacher Appreciation Week at a board meeting. Teacher Appreciation Week this year falls on the week of May 1st through 5th, and we bring a resolution a couple of weeks ahead of time to let people know that it's coming up. And then we have a celebration for the teachers during that week.
Okay. Someone should read it.
All right. Do you want me to read it? Or does somebody else want to read
I'll
it?
read it. Whereas the governing board of the Albany Unified School District and Superintendent Williams wish to commend and express their appreciation to the teachers, counselors, program specialists, psychologists, speech-language therapists, nurses, and all certificated staff who serve the students of the Albany Unified School District. And whereas the governing board and superintendent recognize that unique and highly specialized skills are required to meet the varied needs of the young people served by district instructional programs and are proud of the success that these programs have achieved. And whereas the certificated staff who daily touch our students' lives have a tremendous influence on their hopes, aspirations, and future success, making each student capable of taking up the challenges of life and not only guide our students academically, but also instill moral and ethical values. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the governing board of the Albany Unified School District proclaims May 1st through 5th, 2017, to be Teacher Appreciation Week. Be it further resolved that the governing board of the Albany Unified School District encourages all members of our community to join with it in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for their dedication and devotion to their work. So there's another line, passed and adopted. So in order for it to be passed and adopted, we need to pass and adopt it. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we approve resolution number 2016-17-19 for Teacher Appreciation Week.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Charlie, aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, passed unanimously. And as it says, encourages all members of our community to join with the board in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for their dedication and devotion to their work. I would like to personally, as a member of the community, express my appreciation for all the terrific work that our teachers do, and I know they work very hard. Anyone else want to comment?
You've spoken for me.
I would just like to thank them for all their hard work. I'm a teacher myself, and I know it's a job that we really care about and deeply care about the children in the community, and I just wanted to thank all the teachers.
Thanks. Anyone else? Julia?
Yeah, I mean, the teachers, I think they deserve more than a week to be appreciated, but I'm glad that they'll be able to be highlighted for all of their hard work and their achievements this week, or the May 1st week specifically. So thank you to all the teachers.
Thanks. Anyone?
Yeah,
Kim?
I wanted to add, when the teachers were visiting the board meetings last month, I really enjoyed hearing their statements and hearing about their challenges and how much extra they give to the students, running the clubs, running the programs, all the things that they do. So I deeply appreciate the teachers and hope that they continue to come and visit the board meetings.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else want to comment?
May I comment? I really want to thank all of our certificated teachers and not just our teachers, but our counselors and our psychologists, our school nurse. Everyone provides so much to ensure that our students are well-rounded, not just academically, but so many times our students go to our teachers for support. So I really want to thank all of our teachers, and I agree. I wish we could do a teacher appreciation all year, but definitely want to make sure that we celebrate our teachers well for them and to recognize them for all their hard work and their service to Albany Unified.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Next is approval of the consent calendar. Does anyone want to ask questions or pull any items in the consent calendar? Charlie?
Charlie, do you want to pull anything from consent?
No, thank you.
Okay, so can we have a motion on consent?
I motion to approve the consent calendar.
I second that.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Charlie, approve the consent?
Aye.
Thanks.
My apologies. I get better audio on KALB Live, but there's an 8-second time delay.
Yeah, I kind of thought so.
Okay.
All right, student board member report.
All Albany Unified School District students enjoyed their spring break and are back in full swing this week in preparation at the high school, especially for AP exams.
Albany High School students are hosting the theater ensemble performance at 6 p.m. at the AHS Theater on Friday, April 21st, and the performances continue throughout the weekend.
The Albany Athletics Booster Pasta fundraiser dinner is also on Friday, April 21st at 6 p.m. Come out and enjoy a night of Italian glamour.
The Albany High School community is continuing to work together to push forward from the hate incidents which have occurred lately, and will be working with Albany Unified School District staff to continue creating next steps for going forward.
On April 25th, the elementary and AMS 6th grade band will hold the Extravaganza concert at the Albany High School gym at 7 p.m.
The Albany Middle School open house is on Thursday, April 27th at 7 p.m. on the AMS campus.
The Albany Middle School Band will head to Cazadera Music Camp on Friday, April 28th for the weekend to have a weekend retreat of music and fun.
The School Care Cornell phone banking evening is scheduled for Thursday, April 20th at 6 p.m. at Cornell Elementary School.
The Albany Preschool had their spring fair last Saturday at Memorial Park.
The Marin Family Dance Party will take place on Friday, April 28th at the Marin School Multipurpose Room at 6:30 p.m.
The parents' viewing of Screenagers, a documentary about children growing up in the digital age, will occur on Friday, April 21st at 7 p.m.
There will be a forum at Marin School to discuss the colonial and rancho days that happen at the various elementary schools and to talk about potentially removing them due to cultural insensitivities that may come up. And this is on Wednesday, April 26th at 7 p.m. at Marin School.
The new state standardized testing SBAC starts April 17th and continues all the way until May 19th.
I'm going to butcher this, but Miss Theriault's fifth grade class won first place in the Golden Sneaker Contest, with Miss Hayward's second grade class coming in a close second, and Miss Buckman Harmon's third grade class coming in third.
And lastly, the Albany Education Foundation will host the Scoops for Schools Ice Cream Social at the Albany Community Center at 4 p.m. on Sunday, April 23rd.
Thank you. Any comments or questions for our student board member report? Well, seeing none, we have the board and superintendent report.
And actually, the two student board members got two of the items that I was going to announce, but tonight or this afternoon, Cornell Elementary School held their community conversation that was open to students, staff, and parents. Albany Middle School has held their conversation, but tonight it was at Cornell.
Okay. Board members. Okay. Yes, Kim.
Right on April 6th, Thursday before break, we had the Sleep and Learning lecture at the Albany High School Little Theater. Dr. Bryce Mander from University of California, Berkeley, he came and gave a talk describing sleep research and the sleep shift that happens at puberty, which causes teenagers to not feel sleepy until much later in the evening. And he also talked about the implications of that for school start times.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, this brings us to persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. We're noting that consideration of an appointment of an impartial administrative panel for student expulsions is on the agenda. So if you want to comment on that, please hold it until the item comes up. So this is for items not on the agenda. We'll ask you to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
My name is Joe Salama. I'm an attorney, and I represent several of the families at the school. I was hoping to get in touch with your attorneys and to hopefully avoid some unnecessary litigation. Whom could I reach out to for that purpose?
You can reach out to me, sir.
Okay. Misha is who?
I'm sorry?
To you.
To me, sir, yes.
Okay, yeah. Got it. Thank you. I'll come after the meeting. Thank you.
Can I use his 2.5 minutes? My name is Alexandra Campbell-Jones. I am the mother of Amber Jones, a junior at Albany High, who was targeted by the racist Instagram page. Here we are again, and strangely, it feels like months since this ordeal began on March 20th. 4 weeks later, it feels like absolutely nothing productive has been done by the district to remedy the harm done to our children. After the complete debacle the district made of the restorative justice process by rushing resolution and overlooking very basic precautions, like removing cell phones from the young men involved in following the racist Instagram account, I decided to seek legal counsel. in order to sue the school district for violation of Title VI, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, that prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, or nationality, 3 things must be evident. Number 1, a racially hostile environment exists. In this case, a racially hostile environment included Instagram pictures of girls and women compared to animals, namely gorillas, pictures of nooses, torches, Ku Klux Klan members, pictures of beatings of black people by white people, pictures of hangings, pictures of girls of color compared to cartoon characters, shaming them for being too thin or too fat, pictures of black girls' hair being compared to vegetables, and a picture with a comment that an Indian young man used his own skin to make a poster that was written in brown paint. These were calculated images that inflicted intentional emotional harm on the victims, including my daughter. Number 2, the second criterion under the 1964 Civil Rights Act is that the district was informed of the hostile environment. You were definitely informed at the school board meeting on March 28th, where 5 minutes of public comment turned into 4 hours of personal testimony of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism experienced by students and parents in the district. When I went back to the AUSD website to review the public comment, it had been removed from the site. The public comment included, but was not limited to, swastikas and the N-word written on the walls. That was his time, so I'll go into mine. Written on the walls at the Albany Middle School, promptly painted over by the custodian, but never acknowledged or discussed by the community. Swastikas on the keyboards and books at Albany High, teachers having inappropriate sexual contact with students at the middle school, teachers sending nude photos to students at the high school, students creating bracketing systems rating girls on their physical attributes and levels of sexual activity. There were comments shared by students who had been told, "Go back to the Holocaust," or "Go back to the plantation." And additional personal testimonies have been shared at African American parent engagement meetings that are equally disturbing, where primary and middle school students have come out of Black History Month lessons that delved into the horrors of lynching and slavery, or the delineation made between light-skinned and black-skinned enslaved Africans, where children were actually commenting on the primary playground about who would have been on the porch sipping tea and who would have been in the fields picking cotton. The fact that this curriculum was even introduced to primary students shows the incredible cultural insensitivity of some of the teachers in the district. These examples show that this problem of a racially hostile environment does not rest solely on the shoulders of these young men who created and followed the racist Instagram account, but also on the teachers who are introducing developmentally inappropriate content and contributing to a hostile environment. So this brings us to number 3, the third criterion for a lawsuit against Albany Unified District under Title VI legislation, which is where we stand today. Has the district responded by bringing the behavior to a halt? This is a critical moment in history for Albany. Should you choose to absolve yourselves of the responsibility of making a definitive decision about the expulsion of the 3 boys who initiated the Instagram account, you will be sorry. That decision should be made tonight. We have all been waiting patiently for 4 weeks after being told the expulsion recommendation would take 3 weeks. Your decision and how you choose to proceed will set a precedent for years to come. Will you perpetuate the reputation of Albany as a sweep-it-under-the-rug district, or even find someone else's rug to sweep it under by turning the decision of expulsion over to outside administrators? Or will you ensure the 3 boys responsible for creating the account and denigrating our daughters are expelled? Don't stop there. A serious restructuring of the environment of racism, sexism, and anti-Semitism that have been allowed to flourish in the district from the elementary level through middle school, with a culmination in high school of this horrific situation. There is no quick fix to this problem, and expulsion will not change the culture of the school, but it is a necessary first step to make right on your zero tolerance policy and make sure that our girls feel safe at school by not having to attend classes with the boys who violated them. And my principal in Richmond, where I'm a teacher, asked me to make copies for all of you. She said, in case I didn't have time to finish the statement.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I do want to point out again, if you want to talk about the decision we're making tonight, whether to have an independent panel hear the expulsions, This is not the appropriate time to make those comments. That is on the agenda for later, and at that time we can respond. Are there any other people who wish to speak on matters that are not on the agenda?
Thank you. Well, I have something that is not trivial in comparison, but is different. The dialogues related to racism and prejudice that are taking place. I attended the second one that took place tonight at Cornell Elementary. And I just had a few questions for follow-up so that we could have a clear understanding of what that process is going to be going forward. The first is just clarification. Is the intent for those dialogues to happen at each of the schools in the district? That's the first question. And if so, when would that take place? And then the third question is, looking at the notes from the middle school, there were a large number of ideas that were generated by the parents, the teachers, and the students who participated. The concern and the question that I have is that within the notes, it identified ideas that were put forth by the majority of parents, the majority of students, the majority of teachers, as well as the minority of parents, minority of teachers, minority of students. And it seems to me that at this point, we want to be open to considering the maximum breadth of ideas and not cataloging them based on whether many people support them or only a few people support them, because we may not know what those ideas truly represent without some further thought. And so I wouldn't want to prejudge any of them too quickly. The second comment about that is, as these dialogues are being framed as a dialogue about related to racism and prejudice, I don't want to lose that the piece of sexism in the original incident that helped drive these dialogues. And just to ensure that as we go forward, we on the one hand are reflective about the breadth of challenges related to prejudices that may exist, but also are mindful of how the original incident played a critical role into bringing us to this place, and shouldn't be lost as we start thinking about potential solutions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So since this is not on the agenda, the board can't discuss this, but I think staff can address your specific questions about process.
Yes, thank you. So we are looking at a maximum options. We're not considering, we are not weighing how many people said one idea versus how many people gave another idea or suggestion. All of the suggestions will be continued, will be considered, excuse me. The conversations, yes, are going to happen in multiple areas at our school sites, and they will need to be held at the high school, but because the high school is much bigger, we're going to be looking at holding community conversations with our students, holding them with our staff across the district, with our support staff, with our parents. So the fact that we have 2 of our schools that have done the community conversations, I know other schools are planning on it, we will be holding conversations. We're also going to hold community conversations with groups out in the community. One of the goals of the task force that I want to create is to have that task force take on a leadership role in looking at all of these suggestions coming from the community conversation to look at some priorities and then to suggest some next steps. So we are going to be sending out very, very shortly, I'm hoping in the next couple of days, an invitation to the community of people who are interested in being on the task force. So I'm hoping that answered that particular question. The last question you had around sexism, the conversations are not only about racism and other forms of intolerance. Sexism is included, anti-Semitism, misogyny, hurtful and hateful behavior, including speech. All of those topics come under the, I would say, under the umbrella of intolerance, and so we will not be excluding sexism or misogyny from that.
Thanks. I'd also want to point out, in terms of community conversation, due to the Brown Act, we can't have more than 2 board members in any conversation unless it's an open board meeting. And to that end, we are having an open board meeting on April 25th that everyone is invited to, so we can have this conversation with the board. We would have had that conversation tonight, except that one of our board members is out of town, and it would have been very hard for him to participate fully over the phone. So that meeting is scheduled for April 25th. We're going to hold it in the little theater so that as many people as want to can attend. Anyone else want to address the board on matters not on the agenda?
Michael Green, I live at 601 Keynes. I'm surprised by the lack of openness of this group. So the first thing is, maybe I got it wrong, but what I understand is that the last time I was in this room, there seemed like 50 people who gave comments, and that was taken down from the website. And I just thought such a critical moment, that didn't feel right. And so I'd like to understand why it is that you did that. And then the second thing is also at such a critical moment, it feels like you are trying to cut off dialogue between you as the decision makers and us. And I'm having trouble understanding why such an important topic wasn't on the agenda both this week and next week. I just don't get it. I don't get, why are you trying, what's your goal? So I'd love to get an explanation of those two things.
So anyone else want to comment on matters not on the agenda?
And I just want to say, the reason that you won't comment on it is what I'm talking about. You made a conscious choice to cut off dialogue between you and the community. It wasn't an accident. And I'd like to understand why you did that.
Okay, moving on.
I think it would be appropriate to talk about matters not on the agenda and our role here. To repeat, if only to say, the agenda is what it is. The agenda has a very generous chunk of time that will probably stretch far later than we'd have expected to talk about a major issue, the question about expulsion panels, et cetera. There is a session to be convened on the 25th to specifically talk about this in as much depth as you like. And that's in the context of a board meeting, when we've got an awful lot of stuff to do also, and lots of stuff that's getting bumped from agendas. I have taken every call. So just on the issue of communication, I've taken every call that I would always let go to voicemail so I wouldn't have to hear the robocalls trying to sell me better cable. So that if someone out there wanted to call and talk to me, I talked to them, every call. And I heard a lot of spam from a lot of robocallers, and I talked to some people. And I'd talk to any of you if you call. I will answer any of your emails if you send it just to me. If you send it to the board president will acknowledge that we can't, as a board, do things except in an open session. This is not a failure of my listening or being willing to talk within the constraints that we live in with the Brown Act. And I would love to see all of you at the 25th as well to talk about anything you'd like to on these issues. And tonight, I'd love to hear you talk about the issue we do have on the agenda.
Thanks, Ross. Kim?
Okay, I do see on YouTube the 4-hour meeting on Albany KALB from the March 28th video, but I don't see it on the district website. So I'm asking the district is.
So I'm looking at where it has archived videos. It does not show, Jackie, that one that's missing.
I have a response to that.
Okay.
There was some problem with the audio of that video. So it is available going through YouTube, but it's not available here. I reported it to the city staff that the audio had a problem. So they removed it, and they've done this before when we've had audio issues. And they work on it and they replace it later. And in the meantime, the YouTube link is always available. Unfortunately, there isn't a way to link the YouTube to this area. And that's something maybe we can fix in the future, where we have a link right on the front of the website. And I can actually probably do that very quickly myself. Just put a link to KALB, but it was not intentional. It's happened before, and it's out of our hands.
So can we get the YouTube link as soon as possible, put on the front page
Absolutely.
of the website?
I think I could do that now. I'll work on it.
Thank you. Julia?
Just kind of discussing communication briefly, I think that from kind of the student end, and I don't know if Alfred would agree or not, but we, at the assembly, the diversity assembly, we stood up in front of the entire student body and let everyone know that we were available as liaisons between the board and the community, because we're able to provide any input from students in the student board member report. We haven't, or at least I haven't, received any direct kind of inquiries from any students except for one student to include a member, or to discuss what happened. And so I think that just generally with communication, if any students have anything that they would like to be discussed, Alfred and I would love to discuss it with them. And I know there is an email issue because we have the student emails. We can't receive emails from outside district or outside of student members, and I think that's working on being switched, but we can leave at the end of this meeting our personal emails so we can be sent emails by any community members. But I just have to say, the one student that did reach out to us, we met with them and district staff multiple times, and they were able to craft kind of a message and whatnot for going forward. And so we felt they were very thankful after that we were able to connect them. The day that they requested help, we were able to get into meetings with multiple district staff members. And so I think that I understand parents maybe feeling disconnected from Alfred and I, but to any students that feel like their voices aren't being heard, find us in the hallways. We're in room 206, every single advisory, so you can just pop in that room. You can find us at lunch. You can come to any of our classes. So that is, if it's feeling difficult, maybe from the student perspective or from the adult perspective, to access the adult board members. We're also here as ways to connect with the board, and the board members can comment on our student board member report. So if there's not something on the agenda, and you read the agenda in advance and you see that what you want to be discussed is not on that agenda, if you reach out to us and it is concerning student voice, which all of these things certainly are, we're more than happy, because we represent all of you, we're more than happy to put that in our student board member report so it can be discussed in a little bit more depth. So it's a direct invitation again for anyone, members relating to student opinion, student voice, to reach out to us directly, and we will do everything we can in our power to suit your concerns and to really have that open discussion with you.
Okay, thank you, Julia, which gives us a segue into the next item, which is a Board of Education Governance Handbook item on the role of student board members.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to see if I can hook in so that what I have on my screen will show up there, which is the section on the board governance handbook on role of the student board members. Let me see if I can, I don't know if this is, see if this is going to work. Oh, did it come up? Okay. It will take some, okay, it might take a little time. My screen here went blank, so there we go. Okay, but now how can I move it? I want to be able to move my cursor on there so I can see it. There it is. Okay, there it is. Thank you. Okay, all right. All right, okay. So the section on role of the student board members in red, because it is a brand new section. And I'm going to zoom in here and see if I can make this a little bit bigger for everybody. And okay, go ahead.
While you're doing that, I'll let you know the video's on the front of the website now.
Great, thank you. Just make it bigger. Okay, just there we go. Okay. Okay, good. So everything is in red because this is a new, it's a new section in here, and I know that the board had a chance to take a look at it. So we can go each line by line if you want, and as you make suggestions, if there's agreement, then I will make the changes right on the screen.
Well, I know that Ross had some suggested rewording. Do you want to?
Yeah, down on a couple of bullet points there. So student board members may speak on behalf of the student body, or they may state their own opinions on matters before the board. The student board member should state whether a given opinion is personal or representing the student body as a whole. I had a little problem with the last part of that second sentence, in that the student board members are selected in a variety of ways. I don't think they would say they speak for the whole of the student body, and so I was suggesting saying something along the lines of student board members serve as representatives of the student body and are themselves students. When speaking on matters before the board, they should state clearly whether a comment or opinion is a personal one or is made on behalf of others, given that you can represent a group or even another individual that wants to raise a point.
Yep. Couple things. This is just throughout the whole section, but oftentimes in reference to the student board members, it states he or she, and I think it's important to be conscious that students of all gender identities can potentially be student board members, and so I think maybe the student or the representative would be a better way to address the member, or the member identify, rather than he or she.
Okay.
We can make those changes throughout.
Alfred.
I wanted to actually ask if we could maybe add a point somewhere in there to sort of discuss the duties of the board, the student board member, and beyond just coming to the meetings, as preparing the report and also reaching out to students to gather student opinions regularly.
Do you have some wording?
Not as verbose as what's written here, but some general ideas.
So you're suggesting adding what is not in here?
Discussing basically the duties outside of showing up to the meeting, specifically regarding the preparing the board report, as well as reaching out to students regularly to gather student body opinions or student opinions in general.
Okay. Can you write one or two bullet points for us, and
Sure.
We can put them in?
I think the first would go in that same bullet I commented on as a third sentence saying, and the students shall give a board report at each meeting as requested.
Okay. Julia?
Additionally, I don't know how the board feels about this, but on the third bullet point from the bottom, student board members may cast preferential votes. I think it's important that it's stated that the students cast their preferential votes before the adult members cast their votes, because there's kind of no point in an advisory vote if it's not taken into account in the final voting, and we fully recognize that our preferential vote is advisory and preferential, but if kind of our role is to put our input into the discussion and then have it be considered in the final decision-making process, my personal opinion is that it would be beneficial if our advisory vote was considered before the final vote was taken. But I mean, obviously, that's a discussion item.
Okay, so your suggestion would be when we're saying all in favor, say aye, that we first ask,
Just for roll call votes.
oh, okay, just for roll call votes, that's easy.
Yeah.
We could certainly put that in for roll call votes.
So I guess student board members may cast preferential votes on all matters before the board prior to the adult board members in open session.
Well, if it's all matters, usually we don't have a roll call vote, so we would have to say specifically on roll
Okay,
call
specific.
votes.
Okay,
The roll call vote will begin with the student board member.
perfect.
Well, and it's also worth noting, I think, that you could call for a roll call vote if you chose. I mean, if we had it, we all sort of.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because it does say that any board member can call for a roll call vote, and that
Okay.
should include you, yes.
Okay, I'm probably not wordsmithing this perfect, but I think I've captured the essence. I'm going to put it in parentheses so I know to go back and make the revisions. So I'm going to read it out, but just so you can get the essence of it. Student board members may cast preferential votes on roll call votes, which will begin with the student member vote. I mean, I'll fix the
Perfect.
language on that, but
Yep.
that's the essence of what you're, okay?
Yep, thank you.
On the student duties, do we want to add a second bullet, or do we want to add it to, Ross, I think you had, yours was
Well,
up
my
on-
part of saying the student board report really fits in that bullet, but Alfred's comment about sort of going out and canvassing students or interacting with the student body is a whole nother bullet point.
Okay, so I'm going to, I'm not sure where I'll put it, but I'll just for right now put it here. Add student board member duties, including use of preparing.
Oh, so the preparing is going in the voting sorry, I'm.
Well, we can move them around.
Okay, for the reaching out to students, I just wrote up, student board members shall make an effort to reach out to students to capture student opinions and deliver such to the board where relevant.
Great. Did you catch that?
I did. I'm not spelling well, capturing student opinions, but I think you'd earlier said something about preparing for the board, like reading the packet and preparing for the board meetings.
Well, that is in there already.
That is already in there? Okay.
I was referencing the preparing the board report prior to the meeting.
Okay, preparing the student board member report, correct?
Mhm.
I wonder, I don't know if this would be appropriate to go in this specific area, but I know, especially recently, a lot of meetings have gone over time, and it's sometimes, and I know we're always presented with the opportunity to leave at the original designated time, but maybe a bullet point just saying, students are allowed, if they wish, to leave at the initial designated end time of the meeting, just so students don't feel pressured to stay if it goes really late, because it's sometimes hard to get super behind on a Tuesday. I mean, obviously, I don't think either of us would want to leave early, but just so students in the future have that freedom if they wish.
Yeah, we could, the first bullet point, which talks about student obligations take precedence, student board members excused from the board meeting, we could add something in there, or may leave the board meeting early if they're, they need to.
Okay, let me just put this in here.
You're not saying early, you're just saying that.
At the time that
At
it's,
the time
so
it's
if it
supposed
says,
to.
right, if the agenda says it ends at
Well,
9:30.
I'd extend that. I mean, if you have a final the next day and you want to leave after the student board member report, that's been done before also.
Okay, whatever you all feel comfortable with.
So I just have, I may just do this with notes right now. Student board members may leave the board meeting at the designated, and I'll have to change the word on this one, time or after the student board report, if needed.
And another one, this is another one that I don't know if it would need to be added, but like student board members shall, and I don't think this also has been a problem in the past, but shall perform in a professional manner, kind of as basically like students are expected to dress appropriately, students are expected to use proper language, things like that, just to kind of set I don't know if that's something that needs to be added, but.
Honestly, I think that should apply to all board members, not just students.
Well, yeah, but I mean.
So if we want to add something like that, it probably shouldn't be just in the student section. It should, because students are board members and should comport themselves as other board members.
Okay.
Kim? No? Anything else?
The only piece that I want to make sure I capture is, Rush, you had made some changes, and I think you sent that to me in writing. We will import that into that bullet point.
Okay. Did you want to comment on this?
I do.
Please.
Thank you, Julia and Alfred, for your LaRon Mallard, 913 Polk. I don't know if you need my address or not, but you can know where to find me. Julia and Alfred's participation, this is, commendable. My question was along that line. You mentioned about the communications for that, and my comment and question was about students' real awareness about the function of the board and what they do. We have government classes that we talk about that stuff. We talk about government and Congress and things of those nature, but, being involved in the board and how it functions, a little bit about where their voice can be heard from that standpoint. How do you feel the students relate to that or know about that?
Yeah, great point. So I think that in working with student board members across the state, I think that's the most common problem is student board members don't quite know how to fully access students, and then vice versa. So maybe a bullet point could be student board members work together to host an annual awareness campaign about the school board in general. I mean, I know there's one senior civics class which requires each student to attend one board meeting a semester, and I think that it's a great way for students and community members to be able to connect with the school board. Because I think that everything that's happened in our community lately has been kind of, in all the negative, a positive that has come out is that students have come to the board meetings and they've expressed their opinions. So I think that's a great point. I'd be more than happy to, with Alfred, make posters, put them on the walls, go into advisory rooms and talk about the role of the student board member. I think that's a great idea. And if you have ideas, maybe we can talk after the meeting.
Yeah, just maybe one is, I know there's various groups, students that meet, the clubs and things of that nature where they have certain things that they're trying to do and accomplish and talk about, collectively. And if they were aware of some of their your board representation, because some of their issues rise to that level that can't be solved or addressed at the school level and need to be at this level. So just a comment to make sure, find ways to have students involved in it. I like that they're on the board. I think that's great. But I think, students in general should be aware and more involved, not just when we have a crisis, but just in things that concern them from an education standpoint.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yep.
Kim?
The board discussed in December the idea that was presented at the California School Board Association conference of having board office hours where 2 board members could visit a school and in just a much more casual environment, and that would be announced ahead of time, of course. I think that's still on the table for this board. I think it's an item under discussion, and I think that could be expanded so that it's not just talking to parents, but the board could have office hours, say, at lunchtime at the high school, and students could just stop by and voice whatever their concerns are, just to establish a different channel, because even though Alfred and Julia know a whole lot of people, they don't know everybody, and just having a different channel could increase communication.
Thanks.
It's an idea.
Additionally, we do have kind of attached, so we have a leadership board, both as being student board members, we're part of the student leadership, student government, and there's a Cougar Concerns box in which students can submit anonymous or identifiable slips of paper with concerns that they have on them, so maybe advertising that further. And additionally, speaking to Kim's point, Alfred and I had discussed potentially having office hours the Friday advisory before board meetings, because basically we have leadership advisories for about 40 minutes on Wednesdays and Fridays. And so we had discussed a little bit maybe devoting 2 Fridays a month to office hours to connect with students, and just basically we sit in an empty room and whoever wants to come is welcome to come. So I don't know what the community thinks of that. We've kind of been throwing around ideas, haven't really done much.
Or just be visible amongst the students that, you can take it, in the cafeteria, because we have a school psychologist who we don't know where her office is, but she's always there, but either out and about sort of thing. So presence amongst them sort of makes it easy for them, or at least their awareness is something that they can make an appointment and have some, quiet time or personal space to talk about it. You have the office, so accessibility makes it all.
Thank you so much.
So actually later this week and in a couple of weeks, for the next couple of weeks, I actually planned on going around to the advisory classes to sort of meet with as many students as possible. I know there are only 2 of us and there are a lot of advisory classes, but I've been, I think we've been working, we're trying to get more connection with these kids, because especially with just communicating via social media, it's really tough to get people to come forward and talk. And I've noticed you really have to go up to them and start, heckling them to get things out of them. So I think it's just definitely getting that out there and just pushing on that, what we've been doing, and also bringing in new ideas like what you've suggested.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so we have a number of suggestions for the handbook, and it's not actually an action item in any case. So we can bring this back for another look with all the suggestions in it at a future board meeting.
Yes, I'll have to do a lot of cleaning up and, of course, adding in the edits from Ross, but I can get it out there. So Julie, what I'm probably going to do, and Alfred, is work on the wording on this, get it to you, make sure you respond only to me. We don't want a Brown Act violation, and just so we capture exactly the wording that you're looking at.
Good to go. Thank you.
Great. Anything else on this topic? Good, then we can move on to the budget priority timeline and process.
Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard, who is going to begin. You got it? Okay.
Thanks.
A short presentation, and then open this up for discussion.
Almost.
Cool. It's done in a minute.
Okay, good evening. This is not going to be fun. It's not easy, but what it is going to be is impactful. The decisions that we're going to need to make over the next 10 months will have both intended and unintended consequences. And so I'll go over what I'm referring to as this, and how we got here, and how we're going to address it. So It really starts back in 2013. The governor saw an opportunity to reshape how schools are funded, and changed the funding mechanism that was in place for over 40 years. And so when he changed how schools are funded, he also took advantage of the opportunity to also address the unfunded liabilities related to public employee pensions. What he did to address this unfunded liability was significantly increase the limits that school districts as well as employees pay towards the pensions. He kind of did this look over here as I propose local control funding and a local control accountability plan, and then slipped in this pension reform piece. And so when it was approved by the legislature, we wanted to ensure that despite the roller coaster with the state funding and despite the increasing mandates that the state pushes onto schools and school districts, we wanted to ensure stability for the school district. What we did over in 2014 and 2015 was develop a process and a timeline. And so the process focused on updating the strategic plan and adopting the local control accountability plan, which incorporates our values and how we want to move the district forward. What the timeline then does is look at our financials and say if we're projected to be below 9% as of the third year, then we would begin having discussions with staff. We would have discussions with the community and with students on how to stabilize the school district. At the second interim report in March, I showed that we are going to be below, that we would be below 9% as of 18-19, and gave a highlight or a preview of what budget adoption would look like 2 months later. And so with that information, it shows that we would need to work with staff and the community and to have discussions and come up with decisions by 10 months from now, February 2018. And the reason for that is because we need to, one of the things that I'm distinctly mindful of in decisions that are made are stress and morale. So it doesn't matter what we call it. We can call it budget priorities, we can call it budget reductions, we can call it whatever, but people are intelligent enough to know what budget priorities means, and once a school district hears budget priorities or budget reductions, then there's a level of anxiety that comes up because if an employee just started with the school district or is thinking about applying to the school district, they may or may not want to stay with the district because of this level of uncertainty. And so we made a decision early on that we would not go through a layoff process this year. That was to ensure that staff, that was to ensure that staff have jobs next year, and but we also wanted to have time to have these discussions with various community groups so that the decisions that we make are thoughtful, that we know what the impacts are, and that we're able to do this thoughtfully. So this is the approach that we're proposing for this budget priority process. When I say equitable across staff, this is not in reference to to a particular program. It's more general than that. And so it's essentially referring to all staff, whether it's certificated, classified, or management, that we need to be thoughtful in how we make these reductions. We also want to, we don't want to do this on an annual basis. We don't want to make this routine. And we want to, we will have to go through the mindset of any reductions that we make would be permanent reductions. The reason I say that is because with the state funding being very volatile, some districts have seen that we could just go through a kind of a temporary process, and then a year or two later, funding will come back up, and then we can restore programs. We're not doing this because of a downturn in the economy. This is due to a change in how schools are funded and the significant cost increases that are passed down to school districts. And so this is essentially like a new normal, and we would have to reshape our budget to survive in this new structure. And so how we plan to approach these meetings would be reaching out to various groups, such as our fundraising groups, community groups, school site staff, PTAs, and student groups. And we would do this in the spring and fall. We'd also target a town hall during the spring, as well as a town hall in the fall. Tomorrow, I believe, is also the opening of registration for the Solano Stroll. And so we're looking at having a booth at the Solano Stroll to help advertise for a fall town hall. We would then receive all the input over the spring and fall, and then the winter time frame is when we'd collect all the information. We'd have multiple board meetings to really digest the information, have follow-up questions, and take action. So the meetings would be structured a certain way. So we'd have a very short presentation that a general community member could understand. We then open it up to Q&A, and we also recognize that there are many, that we have a very intelligent community, and we have an opportunity to really develop focus meetings with individuals who may know a lot about schools, school business, or have a specific approach on how to go about it. And so what we're trying to avoid is, two experts having a conversation and then like a big audience kind of just watching the conversation, trying to understand what's going on. So we want to meet with those experts to get an understanding of their perspective, but do that outside of the general community meeting. We want the general community meeting to be more open, where any person can feel comfortable with making a comment, having a question, and and so through those meetings, we'll also get an understanding about, we'll be able to engage the community, we'll be able to help clarify any misconceptions, and then go through our webpage to post key information that'll help clarify for the general community. But what we're trying to avoid is having myself or the superintendent be the sole person to collect the ideas, because we have our own knowledge base, and what we want to avoid is not capturing the recommendations in the right way. So we want to capture it in their own words. And the way we would do this is through a specific email address, as well as a survey link. Now, we also recognize that there are some people who may not have access to email or the internet, and so we would develop these paper forms with these questions below so that they can submit it to the district office. And we'll have copies of these at City Hall as well as the library for easy access. The focus is that we would not just focus on, how do we reduce costs, but we also want to understand from staff and the community, what should the district maintain and what should the district improve upon. This will then give us insight on, what programs the community is aware of and what their thoughts are on each one. One example is maybe they're not aware of a certain program that we have in place, and this would just give us an opportunity to help advertise that program better. After we collect all this information through the spring and fall, we would then distill it and analyze it, and then come up with a list of the ideas and recommendations received for each question, and then post that for the board and public to review in the winter. That will allow us to, kick off several board meetings where we can really talk about the ideas and recommendations that we've received, and have a discussion through that process. And then through that process is when we'd be able to develop a specific list in order to make reductions. I want to emphasize that this is also an opportunity to add things. It's just that we could add things in one area to help improve it, and then we would just need to reduce things in other areas. So this shouldn't just be a list of reductions, but how can we make the district better under this new structure forced by the state? And so this is the same timeline and a few next steps. That's it.
Thank you, Alan. Okay, before we go into any other board comments or questions, I just want to, for the benefit of anyone who hasn't been following all this closely, I will try to keep it very brief, summary of school finance in California. Before Proposition 13, schools in California were financed, as they are in most states, by local property tax. Proposition 13 significantly cut the amount of money brought in to the state or local communities by property tax And to compensate for that, the state changed the funding of schools so that all the property tax that would go to schools goes first to the state. Then the state reapportions it to individual districts. This was supposed to make the funding equitable across the state. There was a very complicated formula, I've never met anybody who understood it, that decided how much each district got. Then recently, as you all remember, we went into what we call the Great Recession, and there wasn't enough money to pay the schools what they were supposed to be paid under that formula. And the state deferred a lot of payments, and school districts were suffering, and we here never actually laid anybody off, but we did have a reduction in force through attrition. Coming out of the recession, it looked like things were going to get better, and they were, but at the same time, the governor decided to change the funding formula. And his idea was that school districts with very high numbers of students who are living in poverty, students who are English language learners and foster youth, needed more money, which they do, because those kids need more help than middle-class kids do just to get through school. But he didn't enlarge the pie, he just changed the way the pie was divided. As a result, districts that don't have high numbers of students in these categories ended up getting a smaller slice of the pie than they would have under the old funding formula. According to a table that a board president in another district sent to us recently, Albany is number 408 out of 492 in school districts in the state in per student funding. That's 408 out of 492. So under the new formula, we're getting substantially less money per student than we would have under the old formula. And then at the same time, as Alan pointed out, the governor decided that there was a lot of pension funds that the state was responsible for, and he didn't want the state to be paying for it, so he shifted the burden to individual school districts. So on top of getting less money per pupil under the new formula, we're also given a larger bill to pay for pensions. As a result, even though the state has been coming out of the recession and in fact is doing better than practically any other state in the nation right now economically, Albany has less money per kid than we had before. And so that's why Alan is saying this isn't a temporary fix we're looking for. We need to make permanent reductions in expenditures. What Alan is talking about tonight is not how we're going to do that, but how we're going to solicit opinions, ideas from the community in what we should cut and how we should cut it. So with that, questions, comments?
Just to add a little to what you just said, we all got this table, and the thing to note, in addition to where we rank, is that the average unified school district gets $9,380, so $9,380 per year per student, effectively. We get $8,096, so we're lagging average by about $1,300 over compared to the average district in California. And I would guess that this is one of the higher cost of living areas of California. It'd be interesting, well, we got it in part because someone out there is lobbying that all of the various districts that are falling well below average ought to band together and try to get their legislators to change the local control funding formula. If it gets changed, it will be some time off. We're living with this now.
Thanks, Ross. Anyone on the board want to talk about what the presentation presented us with, which is how we're going to structure these meetings and try to solicit input from the community? Ross?
I would certainly advocate anyone who's got ideas for new things to do, whether or not they cost more money or save money, throw them into the hopper, because I think one of the things we ought to be able to do is figure out where we've got gaps and holes, and if we're going to have to deal without this, let's compensate with that. You know, I'm a sport parent. I drive my kid. If it were easier to get kids to games because the process wasn't so burdensome and onerous, we could live with only 2 buses for varsity softball for a whole season. So figuring out how to make processes easier will help, and as much as figuring out how to make things cheaper.
Anyone else? Questions or comments in the audience? Oh, good. Charlie?
I switched back to cell phone, so I'm on the same time schedule that you are now.
I think it's at the bottom of the...
I had a question or comment on the page which has the suggestion that budget reductions be distributed equitably across staff. And I had sent a question, and Alan, you actually amplified on your answer in your written response to the board. And I believe what you suggested in your written response was that we should be more or less maintaining our current distribution of funding among certificated, classified, and management, if I understood your response correctly. Did I get that right?
Yes, the ratio, yes.
And I guess I wanted to comment on that in that it basically makes sense if we think we have the optimum ratio of certificated, classified, and management staffing at present. But I'm not entirely certain that we even know what the optimum ratio actually is. And we might want to preserve some flexibility for how we think about the best way to staff the school district. There's a lot of employees, and it might be that some slightly different ratio would be preferable in some way. So I just wanted to offer that perspective that I appreciate your thought about distributing the budget reductions across staff, but maybe we shouldn't lock ourselves into a specific formula.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
Good. Thanks, Charlie. Anyone else? Anyone in the audience? We're going to let Alan off the hook that easy?
Well, I guess I add a little bit. I mean, I'm still hoping that the governor's May revise will present a better picture for us, but I think that it's unlikely that it will save us in the 2019-2020 year, where it looks like we'll be down below 1% of total reserve. So I think this is necessary, and I think it's a good process that's been outlined. I think that the overall state of education funding in California is dreadful. I think that it's shameful where we stand in the nation in terms of how we fund education. We're still in the 40s. I think maybe we're 44th, 45th in terms of education funding in the nation. We should be in the top 10, and we're so far down. School Care a few years ago put out a brochure that said, "Thank God for Mississippi," because at that time they were the only state that funded schools less than California did. So we've worked our way up a little bit, but not that much. If people are interested in how to get our state out of the situation, work on reforming Prop 13 so household owners can be protected, but that businesses are not protected and that businesses start paying their fair share. Thanks.
Right, and I think that actually we haven't worked our way up. I think a few other states have worked their way farther down.
Oh, that's sad. Yeah.
Okay, anything else? We have the adoption of a core literature novel for Albany Middle School.
Thank you, President Black. Trustees, I'm going to turn this over to Peter Parenti, our Assistant Superintendent, who is going to walk us through the adoption of this core literature novel for Albany Middle School. Mr. Parenti.
Sure. If you could just be patient for a moment. I opened up the wrong document, and it only has the agenda, not my backup. So just 1 minute, please. Just 1 second. Now I got to jump to the page. Oh, you want to do this? Thank you very much, Alan. Yep. Just a little bit of background history. Albany Middle School went through an adoption process 5 years ago and adopted an anthology of various readings, as well as a few novels, as part of their new English language arts core content. Since then, they have continued to revisit the anthology from 6th through 8th grade. It has wonderful resources and several activities, much more than any teacher could fit in a single school year. But they've also recognized the need to continue to keep their language arts program updated. Is it still taking?
No, I think that's your desktop.
Oh, that's my desktop. Oh, sorry, guys. There we go. Here we go again. So, most recently, this year, the teachers have piloted the use of a novel, and I want to distinguish the difference between a novel that is used at the school sites as a supplemental text versus the novel that is an adopted text. The novel that is a supplemental text does not need to go through board adoption process and is not required to be taught to all students every year. Supplemental is just that. Teachers have some space and time in their school year in order to select items that respond well to the needs of their students during that school year, but they're not necessarily required to have to teach those specific items every year to all kids. This time, they did pilot a novel that they felt would expand the needs for all students, and now they'd like to propose that it be adopted so that all students receive this instruction. The novel is titled Weed Flower. It is written by Cynthia, I want to pronounce this correctly, Kadohara, and the story is a dramatization of a young girl and her family's experience in the 1940s in California. I won't reread the summary by Scholastic, but I will open up the idea that it is a novel that fictionalizes the events leading up to the internment of Japanese people during World War II. According to the teachers, the novel, let me get to their place, language arts skills. The novel will give them an opportunity for students to tackle difficult topics like racism and discrimination. It allows for tremendous discussion and learning around how our Constitution works, issues of immigration, the causes of bias against immigrant populations, and how threat of war can create atmosphere of fear. I want to highlight a few things about the language arts skills, and then I'll talk about the ways that teachers choose their novels. The teachers who have piloted this novel tried and were successful at teaching students the skills it takes for persuasive essay writing, the Socratic circle discussion in their classrooms, many expository research topics like comparing and contrasting immigration issues through history, and they were also successful at literary analysis of theme and character development. Again, this is, to clarify, this is targeted for 7th grade English language arts instruction. The teachers found that this novel worked well for the purpose this year as a supplemental, and they'd like to adopt this. So what they did was they reviewed a few criteria. They wanted this to be an accessible text for independent reading. So we use one standard called the Lexile reading level. A lot of research that tells us that Lexile reading levels can be somewhat accurate in helping us decide whether or not a student can read something on their own, read something with some guidance, or read something at what's called a frustration level, where they need lots of help. 750 for a 7th grader is typically that range where they can read things between independent reading for pleasure and with some structured guidance from a teacher, but not at a frustration level. So they used that as one of their criterias. They also used another criteria where they were looking at their history, social science curriculum. And in history, social science in 7th grade, the focus is on medieval history. And one of the units they've developed carefully is their medieval unit on Japan. This novel helps them make connections between their medieval history and their English. It is important to note that teachers at Albany Middle School in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade all core their English and history classes together. So one teacher teaches both the English and the history to the same group of students. That allows them to have a good hour and a half or 2 hours of time to make connections between history and English. The 7th grade teachers found this book helps them do that as well. That would be the piece I have. So open this up for questions for you.
Okay, I know Kim had something she wanted to talk about.
Well, yeah, I think it's very important for Albany students to be aware of Albany history. One of our leading citizens, Jewel Okawachi, experienced many of the events described in the Wheatflower novel, which is fiction, in her actual life. Miss Okawachi was of Japanese heritage. She was born in the U.S. She lived on Curtis Street and went to Albany schools. She and her family were interred for years in the Gila internment camp in Arizona. She returned as a teenager to Albany and later raised her family here and was a long-term member of the city council and served as Albany mayor. She also was one of the founders of the Albany Education Foundation. Her contributions to Albany were so great that in 2009, Terrace Park was renamed Jewel Okawachi Terrace Park. So I wanted to suggest that the 7th grade teachers be provided with a fact sheet on Miss Okawachi that they could choose to use in the classroom if they cared to. Jackie, could you show the, just a moment. Yes. I know that at one point she gave a presentation at the Albany Library about her experiences in the internment camp. And she mentioned during that talk that when her family moved here to Albany, well, she was I think 1 at the time, but there were 5 Asian families and there was 1 black family here. And so she certainly faced many challenges.
Alan, could you push the button and put it back on mine? Thank you.
If the lights, she's the little girl sitting on with the hood of the car next to the boy there at her home on Curtis Street. And the bottom picture shows Jewel on the Albany beach with her father. Her brother, even though they were interred in Arizona for the length of the war, her older brother served in Italy and was killed in the line of duty in the war. So they lost, she was able to regain their home when they were let out of the camp, and she came back to Albany. But she stated publicly several times that her father never really recovered from the treatment that they were given. So can you, the other one? That's a picture of the Gila River internment camp in Arizona where the family lived for nearly 3 years. So I think that Jewel did a great deal for Albany, and I just thought this was an opportunity to bring home to students our own history and what's happened here.
Thanks, Kim. Anyone else want to question or comment this? Anyone from the audience? This will come back on consent calendar for approval?
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we have 2 review and action items. Just quickly to get it out of the way, we've switched the order of them, so we will have the approval, hopefully, of the Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators first.
Yes, I'm going to turn this back over to Cynthia Tia, our Director of Human Resources, who will present this item on the approval of a Declaration of Need for Fully Qualified Educators. Ms. Tia.
All teachers who work for the district are required to be assigned correctly to their position, which means that they have the correct credential for the subject that they are teaching. On occasion, we have to make some, what's the word? On occasion, we have to hire somebody, possibly who might be an intern or who might need to teach outside their credential area. And that is something that we can do through the CTC, through the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, and it's sanctioned. You just have to do the proper steps. And one of the proper steps you need to do is to annually put out a declaration of need for fully qualified educators. And when you do that, you are projecting areas that you might need to make some of these adjustments. So this is our annual declaration of need for fully qualified educators.
Thanks. Do we have any questions? Comments? How about a motion?
I move, what's the action?
I think we
To approve the declaration of need.
Approve the declaration of need.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to the item that I think most of the people in the audience, and possibly quite a few people at home, have been waiting for. This is a consideration of the appointment of an impartial administrative panel for student expulsions. And I just want to, before I turn it over to the superintendent for an introduction, I just want to make a brief comment. Some of the comments that I've heard, some of the emails that I've read, seem to imply that people think that the board has already made some decision on this. The board has had no discussion of this. This is done in open session. I have no idea how this will come out tonight, and we are interested in hearing your opinions on it. Superintendent.
Thank you, President Black. This item, the purpose of this item is for the board to discuss and make a decision on whether to hear the expulsion that are pending, or to appoint an impartial administrative hearing panel to conduct the evidentiary portion of the student expulsion hearing. This is per Board Policy and Administrative Regulations 5144.1. In Albany, the board has the discretion of hearing the expulsion, or to appoint a panel, or to appoint a hearing officer. So the board will need to make a decision after discussion on what the board would like to proceed, or and then give direction to staff.
Also, just to be very clear, if the board did decide to appoint such a panel, the panel would make the have a hearing, make a determination on evidence, and come back to the board with a recommendation. It's still the board that votes and makes the final decision. So there's no way the board is getting out of the responsibility of making this decision. It's still our decision. With that.
Well, to clarify, if we had an outside panel, the panel decided it was not recommending expulsions, that ends it, is my understanding from EdCode. It's similar to, you can't sort of appeal a not guilty verdict. So I would like a clarification on it. My understanding is if that group or an individual selected to do so came back and said, no expulsion, we don't get to overrule them or otherwise change it. We merely act only if we are given an expulsion recommendation.
My understanding is that if there is a hearing panel, the evidentiary portion of the hearing, the panel hears it, and then they do what is called a finding of facts. They write that up in a report, and they do make their recommendation to the board. I can double check with legal just to make 100% sure, but it's my understanding that if the recommendation is not to expel, then unless that is appealed by the family of the child, which I could not imagine that it would happen, then that recommendation would stand. However, if the panel recommends an expulsion, then the family of the student has the right to appeal to the County Office of Education.
What are you saying? So if we selected a group of people to decide on the facts of things, and they came to us and said, we recommend an expulsion, it is still up to us then to decide if we accept that recommendation and expel.
That is correct.
Or we could decide, well, for whatever reasons, no. And if we did decide to expel, it could then be appealed up the chain.
That is correct.
Can always be appealed.
But we enter in the picture if we have an outside panel, if and only if that panel recommends an expulsion, is my understanding.
No, it still needs to come back to the board as a recommendation. If the board voted to expel after receiving a recommendation not to expel, I think that the appeal would be automatic.
But I think, I was reading this today, and I really would appreciate this being looked into. I believe it says, if an outside panel comes back and says, no, we do not recommend an expulsion, that is the end of it. So that would be a very important thing to know fact certain, if that's what the process means.
Okay, well, it can't be the complete end of it because it has to come back to the board as a recommendation.
Well, and my understanding is if the recommendation is no expulsion, the board does not then have a further action, but this should be
Okay,
looked
that
at.
would be worth looking into. But to me, the real question that we need to decide tonight is what's best for the community and whether the board can, in fact, hear this and be impartial. And I think each board member needs to answer that question. Jacob.
What Ross just brought up right now is new to me, and I wouldn't feel comfortable voting tonight until we get an answer to that, because I think it's very important for us to do the right thing, but if we send it off somewhere else and they come back with a recommendation, I thought that was simply a recommendation, and we made the final decision. But from what I'm hearing Ross say, if they come back recommending no expulsion and we're stuck with that decision, I can't vote until I know if that's ed code or not.
Okay, so I'm going to turn to staff and ask whether it's possible to get a legal opinion before we finish tonight, because if we don't vote on this tonight, we can't meet the timeline for an expulsion hearing.
I can step out and try to make a very quick phone call and then see if I can
And to be clear,
get an answer.
we can't vote on an expulsion tonight. There's been no hearing yet. And I know you don't want us taking a legal action without following process. A lot of the trouble that we're in now and that we're hearing from you about has to do with imperfect following of process and procedure. We want to be sure we do this right. This is a highly impactful event for a student who is expelled. This is not trivial. Now, I'm not the least bit saying that there weren't people who were harmed. But I know you don't want us punishing somebody who was not actually involved, and we haven't had the evidentiary hearing yet. So we need to know before we have that vote. We can't condemn somebody first and then hear the evidence.
Paul, it
Kim.
seems to me that we could decide not to convene a panel, and then we know that
Absolutely.
we have full authority. So that's one thing that we could do.
Absolutely.
Even in the absence of legal opinion.
Okay,
Yes.
I have here's a response. The question was, if the panel does not recommend an expulsion, can the board still expel? The answer is yes, although the board's decision has to be based upon the findings of fact, not necessarily the recommendation made by the panel.
Okay, did that answer your question, Jacob?
Not really, because in the email that Val sent to us earlier this afternoon, I'm sure you guys all got it, but In the last paragraph, it says, if a panel is convened, the panel hears the case and then determines the findings of fact and makes a recommendation. The finding of fact and the findings of fact and the recommendation is provided to the board in writing. However, the board will not hear all of the details of the case. So if we're sending it off to somebody else and they come back whatever their recommendation is, how can we make a final decision when we haven't seen all the facts?
Well, that's why we're deciding tonight whether to do this. If you feel that you can't in good conscience appoint a panel for that reason, that's the way.
I mean, is that really the way it's set up? Because that just sounds odd to me.
Yeah,
that we would send it to somebody else and then it comes back to us and we don't get to see the facts?
They would give a summary of the facts, but we wouldn't hear the entire.
We wouldn't hear all the
testimony.
details?
That's right.
Because if the board chooses to hear the case, then you get to hear, that's the choice that the board has made, and the board gets to hear everything because you are the deciding body. If the board chooses to have a panel hear the case, then it is the panel who hears all of the details. And then the recommendation with the findings of fact is made to the board. Otherwise, the board would be retrying the case that they had the panel do.
Kim.
I don't see any benefit to convening a panel. The only possible benefit that I could see is that if we board members felt that we were not impartial for some reason, and that any decision that we made would then be overturned at the county level. And if enough of us felt that way that we couldn't try it, then I can see that we would have to convene a panel. In the absence of that need, I don't see any benefit to convening a panel.
I'll give you a chance just a second. My response to that is, I don't think it's whether we feel we can be impartial so much as to whether the people representing the student accused feels we were impartial. Having the panel would remove any doubt as to whether the board had been impartial in hearing the case. And we do have, I can say, quite a bit of pressure from quite a few people to find these kids guilty. I'm not saying that I can't be impartial, but I am saying that somebody else could say we hadn't been impartial. That's the only consideration. Julia?
I think Ross can go first. Mine's like a little bit too.
Yeah, so this is in the AR regarding expulsion or discipline. In the administrative regulation, it says under the area alternative expulsion hearing officer or administrative panel, in the third paragraph it says, the hearing officer or administrative panel shall, within 3 school days after the hearing, determine whether to recommend expulsion of the student to the board. If expulsion is not recommended, the expulsion proceeding shall be terminated and the student shall be immediately reinstated. The superintendent or designee shall place the student in classroom instructional program, any other instructional program, rehabilitation program, or any combination of these programs after consulting with district staff, including the student's teachers and the student's parent/guardian. The decision to not recommend expulsion shall be final. It says Ed Code 48918E.
That's what I'm looking at, 48918.
Okay, so we just had an opinion from a lawyer that was different from that.
I read
administrative
Ed Code
regulation
verbatim. Okay, well, then
is not law.
Our administrative regulation does, that's a citation of Ed Code, though, so.
Okay, the citation of Ed Code is law.
We should figure out if our administrative reg is wrong.
Or lawyers have been wrong too before.
Lawyers have been wrong too before, yes. That is true. Julia?
I would just like to acknowledge the frustration of the community kind of at the bureaucratic practices that are taking place. I completely understand how, and I'm personally frustrated as well that this process is moving so slowly, but I think it's important that we do uphold the innocent until proven guilty. And although all evidence that we all as a community have seen, in my personal opinion, kind of points in a certain direction, I think that it's the fact that this process takes place is very crucial in knowing that the final decision is the right decision. I apologize on behalf of the bureaucratic process that we have to go through this process, but just know that it's to keep in mind the best interest of every single student. And until those students, if they are expelled, if they are not, currently they still are Albany Unified School District students, and so we do need to consider everyone's needs, and so I think that's just something important to keep in mind. But I do want to apologize kind of for how this is going in terms of the timeline. I know it's really frustrating, so I'm sorry.
Thanks. I want to say, it's a personal thing. What happened was not acceptable. Intolerance is not acceptable. Bullying is not acceptable. And there's no question that the victims need to be protected, and we are committed to protecting them. So that, I don't think, is the question at all. The question is whether the process is entirely legal, will hold up on appeal, and whether the right people are being punished. And that is our concern.
So I have education code here, and here's what it says. This is under subdivision E. If the hearing officer or administrative panel decides not to recommend expulsion, the expulsion proceeding shall be terminated and the pupil immediately shall be reinstated and permitted to return to the classroom instructional program from which the expulsion or decision is made. From which the expulsion decision is made by the parent, guardian, or responsible adult. The superintendent of schools or the superintendent's designee shall consult with school district personnel, so this is really small, including the pupil's teachers and the parent, guardian, or responsible adult regarding any other school placement options for the pupil, in addition to the option to return to his or her classroom instructional program from which the expulsion referral was made. If the hearing officer or administrative panel finds a pupil committed any of the acts as specified in subdivision C of section 48915 but does not recommend expulsion, the pupil shall be immediately reinstated and may be referred to his or her prior school or another comprehensive school or pursuant to the procedures set forth, and it gives this citation.
Okay, so if the hearing officer decides that the student didn't do what he's accused of doing, then the expulsion hearing is terminated. If he decides the student did do something but does not recommend expulsion, the students can still be removed from the school. Is that what it says?
It's, no.
No, it's still.
If the hearing officer or administrative panel finds that the pupil committed any of the acts specified in subdivision C of section 48915 but does not recommend expulsion, the pupil shall be immediately reinstated and may be referred to his or her prior school or another comprehensive school or pursuant to the procedures set forth in section 48432.5.
Right, or another comprehensive school.
A continuation school of the district. The decision not to recommend expulsion shall be final. Okay, hang on. I got two more sections I want to read here. If the hearing officer or administrative panel recommends expulsion, findings of fact in support of the recommendation shall be prepared and submitted to the governing board of the school district. All findings of fact and recommendations shall be based solely on the evidence adduced at the hearing. If the governing board of the school district accepts the recommendation calling for expulsion, acceptance shall be based either upon a review of the findings of fact and recommendations submitted by the hearing officer or panel, or upon the results of any supplementary hearing conducted pursuant to this section that the governing board of the school district may order. The decision of the governing board of the school district to expel a pupil shall be based upon substantial evidence relevant to the charges adduced at the expulsion hearing or hearings. Except as provided in this section, no evidence to expel shall be based solely upon hearsay evidence. The governing board of the school district or the hearing officer or administrative panel may, upon a finding that good cause exists, determine that the disclosure of either the identity of a witness or the testimony of the witness at the hearing or both would subject the witness to an unreasonable risk of psychological or physical harm. Upon this determination, the testimony of the witness may be presented at the hearing in the form of a sworn declaration that shall be examined only by the governing board of the school district or the hearing officer or administrative panel.
We're getting into the weeds here about the hearing.
Okay.
So I guess that answers your question. If we do refer to a panel and the panel comes back and says, does not recommend expulsion, then it's over. We cannot expel the student.
And if they do recommend expulsion, we can either take them at their word and agree and look at the evidence they've offered. But we could actually go beyond and say, we'd like to hear more. That was the last thing there.
Right, okay, so I'm hearing from you, Jacob, that that would not be an acceptable outcome of tonight's discussion.
Yeah, it doesn't seem how on one side, if they say expel, we can decide yes or no. But then if they say don't expel, we can't say yes or no. It just, I understand that's the way it is, but I have an issue with that.
Okay. Ross?
Yeah, I need to say up front, and I've said this with various folks I've talked to about this, I have something of an issue in this general case because I'm actually an affected party. My daughter is in one of the photos on the Instagram. I only know this because I watch the news. And people should recognize that what the board is hearing now, and if you've been to previous board meetings, is all we hear, right? We're not getting special briefings on who all the perpetrators are and who all the victims are. We're hearing it in the news, we're hearing it from our daughter, we're hearing it from people in the community, we're hearing it from people who say, well, all 50 of them should be expelled, or, you know, that we're hearing a lot of hearsay, we're hearing a lot of poorly reported news, and we're hearing a small amount of information that comes in these sessions that is largely factual. So we as a board about to hear a case, if we hear this case, are really not, we don't know the names of any of the parties, to my knowledge, through any official channels yet. So the people who would like the, you know, instant justice ain't gonna get it. So if we, the board, do hear this, and if I am part of that board, I either would recuse myself or I would decide that maybe I felt I was sufficiently unbiased. I don't know if that puts the case at risk if it's ever appealed to the county. I may necessarily have to recuse myself, but I am part of this too.
Thanks. Please.
From the Cambridge Dictionary, impartial is able to judge or consider something fairly without allowing your own interest to influence you. Recuse, according to the same dictionary, to say that a judge or a member of a jury should not be involved in a trial because they have a special interest in its final result. With the matter of impartiality, I mean, are we talking about bias or special/own interests that will influence your decision? Is the board's position that you as a body are so conflicted by impartiality and/or recusal to the extent that there are not enough members to make a decision? Or if there's a show of hands of folks who feel they need to be recused or can't be impartial. With that notion, maybe expanding on this notion of impartiality, isn't it the duty of this board to objectively, regardless of who is involved, determine whether the acts committed by the perpetrators rise to a level of egregious behavior that has inflicted irreparable harm, endangered other students as well as themselves, and therefore must be expelled from the school district for the good of the school district? I think that with this whole point about impartiality is the biggest block here as far as making the decision. And I think most people, when we start talking about an administrative panel, that opens up a box of a whole lot of other questions about who they are, who chooses them, what's the criterion, do they reflect the values of this community? It just adds a whole nother dimension that I think before any of that is voted on, I think folks here would like to know the answers to both of these sides of the issue.
Thanks. That's a great point. I just want to say here, and Charlie, if you're with us, is there anyone here other than Ross who, for obvious reasons that he's already described, might not be able to meet the criterion of impartiality? Is there anyone here who feels they could not be impartial? I'm going to leave the school board members out of this because you don't sit on the panel. Kim?
I feel I could be impartial.
Jacob?
I know I could be impartial.
Charlie?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Paul. This time without the time delay. You know, I've heard a number of expulsion cases. It's one of the most difficult, one of the most challenging parts of being a board member. I am very willing to take on that task. It's not a happy task, but it is part of what we need to step up and do as board members.
Thank you, Charlie. And I will say that I do believe I can be impartial, but I also want to say to some people who have been very vocal that you're trying to influence the decision by insisting on expulsions before we've had the hearing doesn't help things at all. Thanks. Go ahead.
I think from everything we've heard today and you saying that you are involved yourself leads me to believe that this panel is not able to be impartial, and I think it should be reviewed by an impartial panel. Even if you think you can be impartial, I think just being around this, you have opinions. I think there is implicit bias, and it's just not fair for it to be seen here.
Can the speaker identify? Can the speaker identify them?
Yes, please, can you tell us who you are?
My name's Olivia Driscoll. I'm in 9th grade at Albany High School.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I think that an impartial panel should be appointed, and I think that the very fact that we need to discuss whether an impartial panel needs to be appointed shows just how much it's needed. The reason why you guys are afraid to send it off to an impartial panel is not because you're afraid of a guilty vote. You love a guilty vote. You love to be able to appease all the people who have come before you. You're afraid of a not guilty vote. You're afraid of the very justice system which we have had in place in this country for years. The idea of sending it to an impartial body, the idea that if somebody's voted not guilty, they are not guilty and cannot be retried. You are afraid of that because you want them to be guilty. You want to expel them. Ms. Val Williams, you yourself, I heard at an assembly at Albany High School, speak on this matter. And what I didn't hear then, what I haven't heard when Mr. Black discussed this issue, is the bullying which has happened to the students who in this case are called the perpetrators. One of their noses was broken. A mob was allowed to form outside the school to shame them. The same mob which ultimately led to that broken nose. And one of the people at this panel went to that location after hours, only after hours of allowing those students to gather, trapping the supposed perpetrator, or the perpetrators in this case, inside the restorative justice meeting, quote unquote. And the fact that that mob was allowed to exist, the fact that this panel, the people at the school district have been encouraging that kind of bullying of the students involved, shows the lack of impartiality which exists here. And I think that allowing ourselves to determine, to recuse ourselves, is a dangerous system, because if you're somebody who really has, you may think you can be impartial, but it's very hard for somebody to determine whether they can be impartial. The fact that you've all been discussing this for so long, listening to the community, hearing what they have to say, it means that you have a lot of opinions. You must have a lot of opinions after hearing all this without ever having seen the evidence, without ever having heard the testimony of the people who are going to be expelled. I know that the person who broke one of the students' noses is back in class. And while there may be some proceedings, I don't know what's going on, there's no city council meeting about his expulsion. That's physical violence. That's actual, verifiable physical violence. But that's not being treated in the same way. because this community has decided to take these kids who made a mistake and to make them the face of racism. It's decided to make high schoolers, all of us make mistakes, but it's decided to make them the face of racism.
Wait a
My name is Don Driscoll.
Wait, one second.
Hold on a second, we have some
Okay,
response.
so we can have clarification of fact, right?
This is on the agenda. We can
yeah.
say anything we want, but
So the student who broke the other student's nose.
now this is there's privacy issues when we're talking about individual students.
Okay, I'm sorry. Okay.
Julia.
Ben, I really appreciate your comments, and I would just like to state that I think if the decision is that we as a board believe we cannot be impartial, I think that means you as the community have kind of done your job in telling us how much you can't and won't tolerate racism. I know that because I've sat through all of your comments, I feel very strongly on the outcome of this case. I know I won't personally be sitting, but I think it's because you've proposed such compelling arguments as to why certain disciplinary actions should be taken over others. And so I think that I think I would personally approach this from a different way, from multiple ways. One being communication between the district and the community is very important, and the open communication is very important. But another way being, you've all shared very personal things, and I feel very strongly in that, your families receive the justice that you do. And so I know, though I don't think I could be impartial, and it's just because you've presented what you've been going through so well and so eloquently, and you've really showed me at least what everyone who's been affected has gone through. And so I think that whether or not we decide to have an impartial panel, it's not necessarily that we're deciding on an outcome, I guess. We're deciding on whether or not we think an outside body would be appropriate. And I just want to say that if we do eventually make that decision, it's not necessarily because we don't believe in the open communication, but because you've been very persuasive and you've been very, very well-spoken in how you've kind of presented how you've been affected by this, I guess. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense, but that's kind of...
Thank you. My name is Don Driscoll. Mr. Stapleton Gray, you pointed out this afternoon that expulsion is a judicial sort of action. It's not a normal legislative action. Mr. Black, you pointed out that the question is whether there's an appearance of a conflict, not whether you personally feel there's a conflict. I've practiced law for 37 and a half years, and I can tell you that the vast majority of judges would disqualify themselves in these kinds of circumstances. And if they didn't, somebody else would do the job for them and have them disqualified. Ms. Trutaine, you assured us that you were impartial. You were part of the demonstration that led to the breaking of one student's nose. You encouraged the agitation. I have 3 minutes to talk. Don't take my time. You encouraged it by repeatedly promising students that they would have the opportunity to shame students who were present for restorative justice. You are on video motioning students to come out and be shamed. There is no way you can create the appearance of not having conflict. If you believe you can do that, that simply shows the extent of your conflict, the extent of your unwillingness to acknowledge what the circumstances are. And frankly, if you, having done that, now vote to make the decision on expulsion, I, for one, believe that you should be recalled. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, Ken?
I was at the high school that day. I did speak to the students, and I asked the students to be nonviolent repeatedly, both inside the atrium and outside the atrium. I did not make any motion for the students to come out because I didn't know, I didn't know where within the office the students were at that time. I haven't seen any video. I can't say what my motion meant, but it was definitely not showing, it was definitely not motioning the students to come out. I think I said the students will be coming out soon, but I was not part of the group that was deciding where the students would walk.
If I can speak for a moment more?
Yeah.
No, please.
Requesting
Let the
permission.
next person speak. This is not a trial. Please sit down.
Okay. There's somebody on the board should ask a question.
You weren't even there. You weren't there. Were you there? Yes. I was there. So was I.
Good evening.
Okay.
Question.
Charlie has a question.
Oh.
Please.
Thank you. I actually would like to direct this question to the superintendent. We have been speaking about the hearing panel and the board and the relative role of the hearing panel and the board in such a case. All the expulsion cases with which I'm familiar, district staff conducted the investigation. They investigated matters of fact, and they prepared a recommendation and provided that to the board. Is there any way in which you feel that a hearing panel could do a more complete job of the fact-finding portion of the investigation than district staff could? Or is there any way that a hearing panel could, under these particularly difficult circumstances, do a job which might be difficult for you to do because you've, by necessity, had to be involved in some of the day-to-day decision-making around circumstances in this case?
Okay, I think I'm hearing several questions. Let me see if I can distill it. The first question was, do I feel that the panel could do a different or better job than the school board in hearing the case and the facts that are presented?
No, I think what Charlie was asking.
Let me correct that. I'm really asking, let's not think about this as the panel substituting for the school board. Let's think about this as, is the panel substituting in some way for district staff? Normally, staff would be the ones who would carry out the investigation, do the fact-finding, and prepare a recommendation to give to the board. In this case, it sounds like the hearing panel would take on some of the functions that staff would normally carry out. Do you find that that would be advantageous in any way?
Okay, so let me clarify. Whether the school board or the panel hears the case, it is staff who prepares the expulsion packet and presents it in either fashion. So the hearing panel would not in any way, shape, or form take on any role of the district staff in the process other than hearing what district staff presents and also hears the side of the family. The board would hear the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Jacob?
Go ahead.
Okay, just real quick. Is the investigation complete or not? I have no idea if it's still ongoing or if it's done.
My understanding for one case, the investigation is complete And I believe for the second case, it is almost complete. We're at the point, I think everyone has been either interviewed or the investigation done. It is putting together the final packet. I would have to double check with Marie Williams, who's actually taking the lead on this with staff.
Okay, so to be clear, there were allegations that we've all heard that there were 3 students involved. You've mentioned only 2.
There were 3 students who were originally investigated in the potential for expulsion recommendation. There are 2 students that we are moving forward with.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so my name is Sarah Francis. I am the mother of one of the victims, the 9th grader who was targeted. After hearing all of this information that's come through, my opinion is that you all are elected officials for a reason. You have ties to the community. You have heard both sides of input from this situation, and I think it would be a disservice to the community to outsource this, per se, to someone else to make the decision. The school has all the information they need. You have all of the evidence you need, and it needs to be presented to you to make that decision. The idea that this is an isolated incident is completely incorrect. I have 2 daughters at Albany High School. One's a junior, one's a freshman. My freshman daughter has been targeted 3 times at Albany High School in cyberbullying. Once in September by a sophomore boy. He thought it'd be fun to take videos of her in her Spanish class and Snapchat it and make ignorant comments. That boy was slapped on the wrist and told not to do it again. Happened a second time in January and February by a different sophomore boy on the football team, making fun of her sexuality and her ethnicity. That boy was given a 3-day in-school suspension where he had to clean up the cafeteria. While my daughter had to walk by this kid every day, terrified to even go to school because he picked on her, he bullied her, and again was online. This is the 3rd occasion now. And I am to the point where the idea that kids make a mistake and, oh, they didn't mean it, this is deeper than that. This has happened 3 times just in my child's freshman year at Albany High. We just moved to this community, and oh my goodness, I want to go back to San Francisco because this is ridiculous. I don't understand that there is no zero tolerance policy in place for this to be happening. I don't understand why only 2 are on the block for expulsion. I don't understand why you can move that back and my kids have to be in class or in the hallways with the kids that targeted her. And for my older daughter, her sister. So this is very serious. Obviously, we all know that. But I really believe that as elected officials, it is your jobs to go through the investigation and make that resolution. It is your job, not someone else, not some other district, some other administration that who knows who gets to pick and who knows what that process is about. And it needs to be done soon. While we keep waiting and have this conversation, my kid has to go to school and deal with the stress of being in school. She's falling behind because she's scared to be there. She's terrified she's going to be targeted yet a 4th time at Albany High School. She's a straight-A student, and her grades are falling because of what's happening. So we need to think about immediate resolutions for the kids that are still at that school and make sure they have what they need, because right now she doesn't feel safe. And I honestly cannot tell her that she is safe based on our track record. So please make a decision that is correct, that is just, but that is swift and to the point where we won't tolerate this any longer. Thank you.
I wasn't planning to speak, and I'm churned up. I want to say that as humans, we can't be impartial to violence, hatred, cruelty, and I'm a lawyer too. Aiming for impartiality, aiming for being fair, for hearing the evidence that's in front of you, for not just having a personal vendetta against someone that's not tied to the information that you learn, just coming in and saying, no matter what anyone puts in front of me, I'm going to do this. That's a problem. having feelings, having empathy, feeling like this is not just business as usual, that's not a problem. That's not being non-neutral or having an impartiality issue. That's being a human. I'm not impartial about Jews being gassed to death. I'm not impartial about young people being threatened when they come to try to learn. I'm not impartial about people being beaten up or killed or bullied, etc., because of their sexuality, because of if they're transgender or not. That's not the goal, for us to have no feelings about this and to come in and pretend that we're robots. That's not the goal of this board, I wouldn't say, and that's not the goal of us as people. We should care. And I want to say for young people in particular who have such strong feelings about these issues, and people who are cheering because people came and spoke out against folks who were victimized in the ways that they were and frightened to go to school. We need to listen to each other, and we need to care about what's happening to each other. And I'll say, just to kind of put it out there, I'm a mixed race family. My husband is white. My little daughters are, one of them's a little lighter than me. One of them, if you saw her, I don't know if you'd know that she had a black lady as her mom at all. It's not about being against each other. It's about trying to listen to each other and try to move forward together. I mean, I know what the racial makeup is of Albany. Schools that I've been to and where I've lived, I've never lived in an all black community or a majority black community my entire life. That's never been my goal per se. I am living here because I believe in the school system, because I want to give the best opportunities to my children. I think that's why everyone's here. This is not about creating divisions that don't already exist or that don't need to be there. This is about us trying to hear each other and move forward together. It's not possible to move forward on our own. Not in my own family, in my own little mixed race family, not in this community, not in the country, not in the world. And unfortunately, the administration that's in place right now, in my opinion, normalizes the idea that we are supposed to speak about each other in these ways and that we're supposed to be on these opposite ends. We're not on opposite ends. We're all together. We're all going to make it together, or we're all going to fail together. So let's not sit here and cheer for people because we think that they're, really sticking it to somebody. Let's not try to stick it to somebody. Like, these are kids who come here to learn, and we love them. And if your friends are involved and it, turns you up because they're involved and you don't want them to be harmed, I understand that. And I understand that people make mistakes, but this is violence. This is deep-seated, from way back when, before young people were here, before I was here. These are not light issues. This is not just starting a fight in the lunchroom. If people don't understand what was serious about this and what was beyond that, parents need to talk to their kids, and people need to talk in our community and understand what was important about this and what was different and unique about it. So I just hope that we can hear each other and that we can care about what each other is going through, whether you look like me or you don't look like me. We're all together in this.
Thank you for that.
Hi, I'm Spice. I never speak. I just listen to all you guys, but I never say anything. But I want to say how I feel as a parent. I'm not a lawyer, just a mom of a student here in Albany. I feel like you all are playing soccer with me. Each person that I talk to says that this is somebody else's problem. This is somebody else's decision. From the principal at the high school who says that he doesn't deal with disciplinary stuff, to the vice principals who say now that, disciplinary is our problem, but I'm not that vice principal. Maybe it was the other vice principal who said this or who did that. And then that vice principal then tells us, oh no, that wasn't me. I didn't say that. That must have been the other vice principal that said that. So that's already 3 people that are all blaming each other and saying, nope, not me, not my responsibility. Let's push this off on someone else. And then it's not our problem at all anymore. Now it's the district. You have to talk to them. They're making the decision. Then the district, nope, it's going to be the board's decision. They make the final decision. And then the board, everybody has lawyers now. We can't say anything. All lawyers have to say everything. Every message has to go through them. We can't really say much of anything. And now the board is now saying, after all of these different people that have all told you all, no, we can't make a decision. That's not our job. Go find your information from someone else. Now you guys are saying that you're going to consider passing it off once again to someone else. When it's not necessary, that's not part of the process. It doesn't have to be passed off to someone else. So I posed the question, how many expulsions that you all have had in the past year or 2 years have been viewed by an outside person versus the board just making the decision?
As far as I know, this would be the first time. If we had a panel, this would be the first time. But it's also had the most response from the public. I mean, usually expulsions are pretty quiet affairs. So I'm just saying, in answer to your question, we haven't done this before to my knowledge.
Yeah, that's my point. I know you haven't. That's just my assumption. I don't know. But I assume that it hasn't been pushed off to other people this many times. Usually we can get a little bit of answers. This time, not so much. I'm just feeling the lack of communication, and I know that there are confidentiality laws and rules and a system that you guys have to abide by, but I feel as a parent that you all are playing soccer with me. And everyone I talk to just pushes it off to someone else. And that's really frustrating from the parents, just not knowing what's happening and not even knowing who is going to give the final decision now, and if you guys can then object that decision or can't. Like, it's just a lot. And I just wanted you guys to know how I feel about it and how you guys make me feel when I hear now that it is an option to be pushed off again to somebody else. We all elected you all to be board members for you all to make these decisions. And I'm sorry, Kim, that you had to deal with this right as you came in fresh, but it is what it is. And this is what you have to deal with now. And if you didn't want to deal with it, then being part of the board wasn't the job for you. Because you knew that you would have to deal with some expulsions. And nobody knew that this was going to blow up like this and that it was going to hit the fan, but it has now. And it's still your job. That's all. Thanks.
Kim?
That does sort of ask the question about how other districts typically handle expulsion hearings. Can our administrators address that?
It depends on what the district's board policy is. So some districts have in their board policy that the board hears the expulsions. In other districts, their board policy has that there's always a hearing panel. It really depends upon the district and the board policy. I have been in districts, for the most part, with the exception of Albany, where the expulsion is either what is called stipulated, where the family agrees to the offense, and they stipulate and say, yes, my child will be expelled, and then there's the expulsion and the rehabilitation plan. And in some districts, it is the parent who chooses. They can either stipulate or have a hearing panel, because those are the only two options that district's board policy has. So I've been in a district where I was the student services director, and there were only two choices. Either you stipulate or you do a panel, and the recommendation was always brought before the board. I've been in another district where there were options, but this is the first district that I have personally been in where the board policy says that the board hears the expulsions. But it is not the only district in California that has this policy. I know there are others.
Thanks.
Thank you.
In terms of two comments. In terms of the recommendation that would come forth from either the panel or the board, is it everyone? Does it have to be consensus, or what is the process?
No, it's a majority.
It's the majority. And so if Mr. Stapleton Gray recuses himself and there's 4 board members left, what does that mean if it's a tie?
I'm not sure, but I think if it's a tie, it would be like a hung jury. There would be no conviction. There would be no expulsion. We would have to ask the lawyer and read Ed Code, but that's my guess is what would happen.
Well, it would be good to have an understanding of that. And then as to the second comment, there is a lot of attention on this. I don't think it's because people there's a lot of attention on this because there are a lot of students involved. There's a lot of attention on this because there's a concern about response by the high school to incidents in the past. That doesn't change the facts of what happened. And your impartiality shouldn't be changed based on the fact that there's attention being paid. The facts are the facts. And I think the school board should consider stepping up if there is a way forward. I think given the question I initially asked, we would need some clarification in order to understand if the school board could go forward. But I don't see how a decision can be made tonight without some of that information at hand. Thank you.
Do we need to extend the meeting? When's it called? Okay, so I'm sorry, just for a second, this is just a procedural matter.
Go ahead.
We need a motion to extend the meeting. I don't know how long we're going to need, but let's just say until 10 o'clock, and we'll extend it again if we have to.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting till 10 o'clock.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
Okay. My name is Brian. I was a student at Albany High School a long time ago, and I was just as black then as I am now, right? And so there were expulsions that happened while I was in school. And if all of this would have taken place while the people that looked like me were being expelled from Albany High, things would have went a lot differently. And I heard the young man come up here and speak about the person who got their nose cracked, and he wants to, what's happening with that person that hit him in the nose. I hear that. You shouldn't be able to hit people. I definitely agree with him. I don't disagree with him. Violence is not the answer. That's not how we're gonna get past this, so I agree with him. However, if that's the case, right, we're not gonna take violence. You hit somebody, you gotta get suspended. But if you take something that is so deep-rooted in everything, in every part of the history of the whole history of being black, like the worst thing that you can think of. I remember when she was speaking, she was very heartfelt about the things that really hurt her deeply, right? And she was like, we need to shine light on that. Totally understand that. That's the most hurtful thing that you can do to her, because it's who she is, right? The most hurtful thing that you can do to somebody who is black, African American, whatever you feel comfortable saying, right? The most hurtful thing that you can do is what these kids did. Yeah, it was a mistake, but it was such an egregious mistake. It was such a terrible mistake, and it's not something that you just, oops. You had to work on it. Somebody had to teach it to you, and I know somebody had to teach it to you because when I drop my daughter off at school every day, I don't see it there. And when she's playing with her friends, I don't see it there either. And when I'm hanging out with her friends' parents and we're going to Warriors games and all the different things that we're doing, I don't see it there. Melissa told you that her husband was white, right? I don't see it when I'm hanging out with him, because it's something that has to be taught. And then not only does it have to be taught, but it's something that as you're doing it, you're thinking about it, and you know how wrong it is when you're doing it. Everybody in this room knows how wrong it is. Everybody in this room, whether you are defending the people who did it, whether you're on their side, you don't want them to be expelled, totally understand that. I totally understand that. If you're a parent of a student, you don't want them to be expelled, your house in Albany is really expensive, gotcha. I understand. I'd be fighting for that too. But at some point, you gotta say, hey, my kid really messed up. And let me just save you the time. If they send it to another group, that group's gonna say expel those kids too. Unless you send it to a group outside of California. Maybe if you take it down south, they might say, no, give them a second chance. But whatever group you send it to, whatever group you say, oh, send it to that, well, let's see what they say in the render. Orinda, they're gonna say expel them too. Well, let's send it to Alameda. They're gonna say expel the kids too. There's some stuff that you just can't do. There's a word, right, that everybody on this board knows that they can't say. You know that you can't say it. Maybe you learned it somewhere through life. You learned that you can't say it. Or if you do say it, it's gonna be an issue that you don't want. Well, you didn't just learn that on accident. You learned it because there's some type of intelligence that you have. So I understand what's happening, right? Like, I get it. We want to make sure that they have a fair trial. But what about the little girls whose lives have been changed forever? I'm thinking about, you know, if I think about if I just get real mad right now. And Peter, I consider us friends, so that's why I'm gonna use you as an example. If I walk over here right now and I punch Peter in the face, how long is it gonna take for my daughter to get sent to a different school? How long is it gonna take for you guys to do that? Is it gonna take a month? No. It's gonna take 2 hours. You guys are gonna call and say, hey, don't try massing off at school tomorrow, because, you know, Brian, you just punched Peter in the face, you gotta go. Like, how long does it take to realize that this was completely out of line, right? Not only does it involve students, but it involves a coach too. There's a staff member that was involved. It's like, not only do you have no respect for your fellow classmates, but you don't have respect for the staff either. The staff member that's been here for 15 years. This is a quality guy that we can't lose. Why? We can't lose him for a number of reasons. One, he's a great coach. Two, he's a great person. And three, there's not a lot of African American employees at Albany in the first place. There's no African American board members. And you have to work really hard to see them anywhere on the campus unless you wait until after school. Show him a little respect. Thank you for your service. You've been disrespected. We're going to take care of it. Because not only are we trying to take care of the students involved, we got to take care of them, right? We got to 100% take care of them. Hey, this happened to you, we're going to take care of it. Having the agenda item to whether we're going to keep it here or send it somewhere else, go ahead, send it somewhere else. They're going to say expel the kids too, I promise you. And you're a great lawyer, awesome. No matter how good a lawyer you are, nobody's going to say, oh, they should go back to school. I mean, it wasn't that big of a deal. It was just Instagram. What? Like, really? Like, I don't even understand why this is such a long, why is this taking so long? If you want to send it out to another group, send it out to the other group. They're going to say, hey, you should expel them. Would you like us to do it or you want to do it? And then if you don't send it to another group, then you guys just say, oh, expel them, great. Or, you know what, just say, hey, send them back to school. Go back to school, don't learn the lesson. Eventually in life, it will teach you the lesson. But if you look at the protests that are happening at the school and you listen to the students don't want them to come back anyway. What's the point? You want to homeschool them? Great. If you want to expel them, just expel them. Worst case scenario, they're just going to go to another great school somewhere else. Who cares? At least the girls who were affected don't have to deal with them anymore. They don't have to deal with this because as we're passing this back and forth, as my wife so eloquently told you, you just keep punishing the victims over and over. They have to keep hearing about it. They have to keep hearing, oh, maybe they're coming back. Maybe they're not. We're doing more to protect the people that did something wrong than we are to protect the people that didn't do anything. They didn't do anything wrong. All they did was wake up and go to school. And all the parents did was send their kids to a school they thought was awesome. Every day somebody tells me, oh, your daughter goes to school in Albany, that's great. I feel good about it, right? At least I did. But my confidence is going, down more and more and more because Are you guys gonna protect her? Is this how you are gonna protect her if something happens? What am I supposed to do as a parent? I think when you guys have a chance, you guys should all go home. You should also email the parents of the victims, and you should thank them for the way that they're handling it. A real sincere email. Don't copy and paste it or check with your lawyers first. Send them an email and just say thank you. It doesn't have to be long, because the way that they're handling it is great. Because what those students did to their kids is out of line. It is out of line, and the way they handle it is marvelous. Because they didn't have to handle it like that. Because what happened, I can't even think of something that would be worse. Like, I really can't even think of something that would be worse than what happened to these kids. And we are playing around like it's something funny and clapping when somebody says something that sounds cool, or, oh, God, that is outrageous. When all kids want to do is just go to school and learn. That is why we're all here. That's why we're here. If you are not in Albany because of the school district, I don't believe you. You're not here for the sports team, because we ain't never been good. Like I say, I was a student. We weren't good then. I was the best player on every sports team, and I wasn't great. So that's not why you're here, right? You're not here for the diversity. It doesn't exist. You're here for the schools, right? So if you're sending a student to sit in a classroom where she might be the only African-American girl in the class, the least you can do is keep her safe while she's there. So send it to somebody else, they're gonna tell you the same thing. It's kind of like when my daughter asks me something and then she asks her mom, we're both gonna give her the same answer. So you guys wanna send it to somebody else? Send it to somebody else. Let's vote on that, get that done. They're gonna take some time, twiddle their thumbs, give you the same answer that we've been giving you for weeks. And honestly, if the parents of the students who actually committed the crime, if they really just took some time to really think about it, they understand that what their kids did was wrong and you can't fix it. They understand that. And I know that it's not gonna be easy, because you're a parent and you're protecting your own kid. That's what you're supposed to do, right? But, I mean, come on. Make the right decision or make the wrong decision. Either way, what needs to happen is gonna happen regardless. So I wish you guys luck. Don't forget to send those emails to the parents.
I appreciate your comments. I just want to clarify that we actually can't send emails to their parents because we don't actually know who they are. That has not been shared with us yet.
That's the height of impartiality.
You know, except for people coming up and saying, you know, it was my kid. We don't know. That's not information that's been shared with us.
Yeah, let me speak on that. So as a board member, I get information in meetings like this. I see meetings, I see official information in official meetings, agendized, the public's invited, that sort of thing. I get other information. Well, in board meetings, so the speakers at the meeting at Cornell included some people who said, I'm a parent of a victim, I'm a parent of a perpetrator. People spoke up and said what I would generally regard as likely to be factual information. I get information from my daughter who says, oh yeah, I heard about that. If it's true. I've absolutely heard things from her I know are not actually true. And I heard things from her that were absolutely true. And I was sitting next to my daughter as we were watching, I don't know, probably NBC Bay Area, when they showed the picture of her and her boyfriend that was on the Instagram site. And they were blurred out, but what was not blurred out were the names, the screen names of the people who liked that posting. And I saw her face fall when she had concrete evidence that someone she knew that she was there on that site. And that was a little data point. That was her presented with a fact. But my awareness of the facts in this case is very, very sparse. I actually think I probably could be impartial, and I would love to be on the panel hearing this. I think I will take it personally as on the advice of people who would say, how can this case stand if anyone wants to appeal it? If it was felt that if my participation in it made it at risk to be overturned or taken up to the county and overturned, I might choose to recuse myself. I'd rather be, as a board member, involved in this decision. I have the one caveat that I know one of these people personally who's on the website or on the Instagram, who has felt pain from this indirectly. The person that felt more pain, I think, was her boyfriend. Long story short, I have a smattering of information. I don't have the email addresses of every victim's parent, and frankly, it would be inappropriate for me to reach out to anybody, victim or perpetrator, if I'm going to sit in judgment as a board member, and I therefore have to preserve that until after this is done. But I would happily meet with anybody out there outside of the evidentiary process to talk about this as long as you'd like.
Thanks. Julia?
I mean, Ross, I think to your point, I don't know if there's anyone sitting up here that doesn't personally know or indirectly know someone who is associated with the account. I know I work with the sister of one of the victims who's directly affected, and she fills me in on what's happening in her household, and it's just horrible to hear. But I think that after hearing the input from the community, my personal opinion is that the board hears this. I think that you elected us, and now you're asking us as our constituents to fulfill our duties. So I personally think that we should do just that.
Okay, thanks. Let's hear one more comment, and then let's take a vote. You've been waiting for a while.
Good evening. My name is Desiree, and I'm a parent of 2 children in Albany. I've spoken before at a couple of these meetings. I've been showing up now because of the severity of what is going on. In case somebody doesn't know, I'm African American myself, and I have 2 African American children. And I am just at that point where I don't know, how much longer we're going to continue in this district. So what this board decides or doesn't decide, or whomever you decide to give it to moving forward, just know that, and I don't want to influence anybody, right? And I think other people have said this before, but this is serious. And I realize that there's a couple of peanut galleries, here tonight, lawyers and whoever else is, taking notes and recording, which is fine. But again, I feel from a parent's perspective that because Albany Unified School District does not really give the correct history in your curriculum, not only for your teachers to students, but also the staff and literally yourselves up here. When I sit down here and then when I come up here, I don't think that maybe you actually know maybe as much, and I'm not talking about the case, just actually in general, about, African American history, because just as the young man mentioned about a mob being outside of the school, well, if you were, and/or whatever those Instagram posters posted about an actual lynching, those were mobs. But people actually died in them, and/or, other graphic things, which if you knew your history, before you get up here and say something like that, you would actually know, well, I should kind of maybe pause a moment before I, kind of go that route any further. So again, I think that this is really why the curriculum, not only for staff, and I'm not saying that anybody is ignorant, okay? I'm not saying that. It's just that with what all is going on, I've been to a couple of meetings now, and I just really feel that I understand people have strong opinions about things, but when you look at the history, there's a reason why these specific things that happen to these kids is a problem. Because throughout history, there have literally been thousands of named and unnamed people who the bones probably are at the bottom of the Mississippi River right now that were not accounted for because of things that have taken place in history against people of color. And actually Caucasians as well, with freedom bus ridings that were blown up. So when you think of literally, in a way, through history of how people have died to try to change to get to where we are now, you have to respect that. And what these individuals did, whether you knew about it, you didn't know about it, if it were my daughter, and I've already stated before, I feel in my heart, if it was my daughter, just as Brian said, if I found out she was a bystander or anything like that, I would have told her before you guys all even made the decision, you're expelled. And I just would have moved on, because it's so wrong to consciously think, well, how would you even think that that was okay? Because of the history behind it. So again, for anybody who doesn't know, and if you take the time while you are clapping to actually look into the history about a lot of the stuff that you say, and I'm not, again, this is all about a race issue. It's not about me up here talking and using the race card, because that's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying that factually, what those pictures portrayed was really dismissing and or disrespecting a history in order to make forward progress. So if somebody doesn't understand that, then I suggest that you get on whatever history book and or YouTube documentaries to really vest yourself so that you understand what these individuals had to repeat history again in 2017, and that should not have to happen. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, so the item on the agenda says consideration of appointment of impartial administrative hearing panel. So we're going to take that as an aye vote would be in favor of the administrative hearing panel. A nay vote would be against having an administrative hearing panel. And Jackie, if we can have a roll call, starting with the student board members, please.
Actually, so in fairness to the public, not a lot more, but something more should be said about what such a panel would, how such a panel would actually be constituted.
Okay, there would be 3 people with valid administrative credentials from out of the district, right?
Yes. They would, the panel would have to consist of 3 members, in this case it would be outside of the district, that hold a valid administrative credential. It could be a retired administrator, it could be a current administrator. And usually when you're looking for a panel, you solicit for names, and panel members can say, yes, I want to serve on the panel, or no, I do not want to serve on the panel.
Okay, so also to clarify what an expulsion hearing is, it's similar to a trial, but the rules of evidence are not as strict as they would be for a criminal trial. The administration serves as the prosecutor, brings the case to either the board or the panel hearing it, presents all of their evidence. The accused can speak or have someone speak for them. And then at the end, the panel or the board goes into private session without any lawyers or administrators or anyone else and makes a decision. The decision goes beyond whether to expel or not. If there is an expulsion, It comes with conditions because expulsions in California are not permanent. Students can always come back within a year, but they don't automatically come back to the school. They come back to a readmission hearing. So if the expulsion required a certain amount of community service, counseling, retribution of some sort, whatever it requires, when the student comes back and asks to be readmitted, the board would then look at whether they had conformed to all of the requirements, and if not, they can not be readmitted. If they have, then they have to be readmitted. An expulsion can't be for more than 2 semesters, I believe.
That is correct.
That's just the law. So anything else we need to know?
And if there were to be an outside administrative panel, we, the board, would select it, is my understanding. It seems to be how Ed Code reads, that instead of conducting an expulsion hearing itself, et cetera, the governing board of the school district may contract with the county hearing officer or the offices, or the governing board of the school district may also appoint impartial
Right.
administrative panel. So if it wouldn't be us, we would be choosing.
We would appoint them.
Well, sure.
Right.
How many?
There would be 3. I believe you already identified some people.
What we would do is we'd get a list of administrators who are willing to be on the panel. We would need to bring it to the board for acceptance of those panel members. We are looking at outside of the district, or if possible even outside of the county. And the reason we had originally thought about doing that was in the interest of impartiality. Outside of the county we would probably find administrators who did not have as much information about the cases, maybe a immediately surrounding district.
Thanks. Any other questions, clarification before we proceed? Charlie, are you there?
I am.
Okay, so Jackie, if you could do a roll call vote, start with the student board members. I vote last as president.
Student board member Friedfelder.
Nay.
Student board member Yoon.
Nay.
Board member Blanchard.
No.
Board member Chutane.
No.
Board member Clark.
Nay.
Vice President Stapleton Gray.
Nay.
President Black.
Nay. Okay, so it's unanimous. We will not appoint a hearing panel. The board will hear it ourselves. Now, please come to the April 25th meeting because that's where we want to start getting all of your ideas. We've heard a lot of allegations about other bullying incidents that never made it to the board. None of those are acceptable, and we want to be sure that we do everything we can to stop anything like that from happening again. So we need your ideas, we need your suggestions, we need your participation. It's got to come from you. We can't come up with all the solutions ourselves.
And may I please add something? I said at the last board meeting, I'm going to say it again. I have issued a directive to the high school administration that any and every incident that gets reported that has to do with racism, intolerance, anti-Semitism, any kind of hate behavior is to immediately be notified to my office and Mr. Parenti so that we can make sure that this is handled immediately. That is the new protocol at the high school.
Thank you. Which brings us to our last thing, agenda items, matters introduced by the board. I don't think we introduced any new agenda items tonight.
You did not.
Okay. With that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.